They say love blinds you, but I didn't realize how true that was until it was too late. My name is Michael Carter, and for 6 years, I thought I was living the American dream. A successful career, a beautiful wife named Rebecca, and a circle of friends who envied what we had. On the surface, everything was perfect. Dinners in our modern, suburban home, shared vacations to exotic places, and nights spent laughing with friends over wine. But perfection, I've learned, is often just a mask hiding the cracks underneath. Rebecca was magnetic. She had this way of captivating everyone in a room, her laughter light but sharp, her smile calculated but disarming. She was the kind of woman who made you feel lucky just to be standing next to her. And I was, or so I thought. Lately, though, something felt off. It started subtly. A shift in her tone, a distracted look during our conversations. She began working late more often, her phone always glued to her hand, lighting up with messages she never cared to share. When I asked, she waved it off. "Work stress," she said. "You're overthinking, Mike." I wanted to believe her. God, I needed to believe her. But that gnawing feeling in my gut only grew stronger. Still, I silenced my doubts. I told myself that every couple goes through rough patches. I planned a weekend getaway to reignite the spark, but she canceled last minute, citing a work emergency. I didn't push back. I was too afraid of the answer I might get. Then came the invitation. A party at Charles's mansion, one of our close friends. Rebecca insisted we go. "It'll be fun," she said, her eyes lighting up in a way I hadn't seen in months. For a moment I felt hopeful. Maybe this would be the night we reconnected. Maybe I was just imagining things. The mansion was alive with energy when we arrived. Music booming, glasses clinking, laughter echoing through the expansive halls. Rebecca floated into the crowd like she belonged there, like she thrived on the attention. I hung back, sipping a drink and watching her from a distance. That's when I saw him. A tall, confident man with a smirk that made my stomach churn. Rebecca's body language shifted the moment he approached. She leaned in close, her laughter too loud, her hand brushing his arm in a way that was far from innocent. I felt a knot form in my throat, but I didn't act. Couldn't. As the night went on, the distance between us grew. She barely glanced my way, caught up in her conversation with him. Then it happened. Across the room, in plain sight, she kissed him. Not a fleeting peck, but a slow, deliberate kiss that felt like a knife twisting in my chest. When she finally turned to me, her face was smug, her voice dripping with contempt. "What's the matter, Michael? Aren't you going to do something? Or are you just going to stand there like the cuckold you are?" I didn't speak. Couldn't. My mind raced, my body frozen. She turned back to him, laughing, and they walked out together, leaving me standing there amidst the laughter and music that now felt deafeningly hollow. I went home alone that night, my heart shattered, my pride in pieces. But as I sat in the darkened silence of our once happy home, I made a decision. I wouldn't let her break me. I wouldn't let her walk away unscathed. She thought she had won, but she had no idea what was coming. When I got home that night, the house felt colder than it ever had. Every shadow seemed to mock me, every ticking second of silence a cruel reminder of what I'd witnessed. The living room still smelled faintly of her perfume, a scent that once comforted me but now felt suffocating. I dropped onto the couch, my head in my hands, replaying the scene over and over. Her words, her kiss, her laughter. It all seared into my mind like a brand. I wanted to smash something. I wanted to scream, but I just sat there, staring at the dark void in front of me, paralyzed by the weight of it all. How could she do this? How could she look me in the eye and tear me apart so effortlessly? Hours passed, but I didn't move. At some point, my phone buzzed. A text from Charles, the host of the party. "Hey man, you good? Saw Rebecca left early with Andrew. Looked messy. Let me know if you need anything. Andrew." The name alone made my blood boil. I knew his type. Too slick, too arrogant, the kind of man who thrived on the thrill of taking what wasn't his. And Rebecca? She wasn't blind to it. No, she chose him. She wanted this. I didn't reply to Charles. What could I say? Instead, I scrolled through old photos of Rebecca and me, our smiles frozen in time. Birthdays, vacations, anniversaries. Moments that now felt like a cruel joke. Was any of it real? Or had she always been this way, and I was just too blind to see it? The anger came slowly at first, like a simmering ember. But as the hours dragged on, it grew. It wasn't just about the betrayal. It was about the humiliation. She didn't just cheat on me. She tore me down in front of everyone, made me the punchline of a joke I didn't even know I was a part of. By morning, I knew one thing. I couldn't let this slide. But I couldn't just lash out recklessly either. That's what she'd expect. Some pitiful display of anger. A desperate attempt to win her back or make her feel guilty. No, I needed to be smarter than that. I called in sick to work that day, claiming I had the flu. In reality, I needed time to think. Time to plan. I spent hours online, searching for anything I could find on Andrew. Social media, business profiles, public records. I wanted to know who this man was and how to destroy him. What I found only fueled my resolve. Andrew wasn't some golden boy. He was a real estate investor, but his business was riddled with red flags, lawsuits, unpaid debts, shady dealings with contractors. He projected confidence, but it was all a facade. Beneath the surface, he was vulnerable, exposed. Rebecca, on the other hand, was harder to pin down. She was careful, calculated. I couldn't find anything concrete, no text messages, no incriminating photos. But I didn't need proof. I had seen enough. That evening, as I sat at the kitchen table with a glass of whiskey, the pieces began to fall into place. I wouldn't confront Rebecca directly. Not yet. That would give her the upper hand. No, I needed to dismantle her world piece by piece, just like she had dismantled mine. I made a list. Andrew's name at the top, followed by a series of bullet points. His business partners, his financial weaknesses, his social circle. Next came Rebecca. Her routines, her friends, her vulnerabilities. The plan wasn't clear yet, but the goal was. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about reclaiming control. She thought I was weak, that I'd just sit back and let her walk all over me. She thought I was finished. She was wrong. The days that followed felt like an endless blur. I went through the motions of life, answering work emails, attending meetings, even exchanging polite smiles with neighbors. But inside I was hollow, a walking ghost. At night, the silence in the house became unbearable, a void that seemed to grow larger with every passing hour. I started sleeping on the couch, unable to bear the sight of our bedroom, of her side of the bed. Rebecca hadn't come home since that night. She hadn't called or texted. At first, I thought it was guilt. Maybe she was ashamed, unsure of how to face me. But deep down, I knew better. Rebecca wasn't the kind of person who felt guilt. Not really. If anything, she was probably waiting for me to reach out, to beg her to come back. But I wouldn't. Instead, I turned my pain into fuel. I spent my evenings digging deeper into Andrew's life, my days masking my obsession behind the facade of normalcy. The more I uncovered, the clearer the picture became. Andrew was drowning in debt, his lavish lifestyle funded by a crumbling empire of failed investments. His confidence, his charm, it was all a show. And Rebecca? She had hitched herself to a sinking ship without even realizing it. One night, as I stared at my laptop screen, a thought struck me. What if she knew? What if she wasn't blind to Andrew's flaws, but chose him anyway? The idea made my stomach churn. It wasn't just betrayal, it was deliberate, calculated. I started to wonder how long this had been going on. Had she been seeing him behind my back for weeks, months, years? The thought was unbearable. I needed answers. But confronting Rebecca directly wasn't an option. Not yet. If I wanted to take her down, I needed to play this right. I needed leverage. I began to pay closer attention to the little details she had left behind. A lipstick-stained coffee mug on the counter. A forgotten scarf draped over a chair. I checked her drawers, her closet, even the trash cans, searching for anything that might give me insight into her world. It was invasive, I know. But after what she had done, I didn't care. That's when I found the receipts. Literally. A stack of them, tucked away in the back of her nightstand drawer. hotel bookings, expensive dinners, jewelry I had never seen her wear. My hands shook as I flipped through them, each one a confirmation of what I already knew. She had been living a double life right under my nose. But it wasn't just the receipts that caught my attention, it was the dates. Some of them were from months ago, long before I noticed her pulling away, long before the party. This wasn't a fling. It was an affair. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. She hadn't just betrayed me once. She had been betraying me over and over again, all while smiling in my face and calling me her rock. I stared at the receipts for what felt like hours, my mind racing with 1,000 questions. How could I have been so blind? How could I have let this happen? But then, amidst the storm of emotions, a single, chilling thought surfaced. This isn't over. If she wanted to play games, I would play too. But I wouldn't lose. The morning after discovering the receipts, something shifted inside me. I wasn't just angry anymore, I was focused. If Rebecca thought she could tear my world apart and walk away unscathed, she was wrong. I wasn't going to beg her to come back or drown in self-pity. I was going to make her regret every single choice she had made. But first, I needed to learn her patterns. I started small, subtle. Rebecca still hadn't come home, so I sent her a single, carefully worded text. "Are you safe?" She responded within an hour, her message cold and distant. "Staying with a friend. Don't wait up." No apology, no explanation. Just indifference. That was all I needed. She wasn't even trying to hide anymore, which meant she'd let her guard down. And that gave me an advantage. Over the next few days, I started tracking her movements. I wasn't proud of it, but I didn't care about pride anymore. Using a shared phone plan, I checked her location history. It was always the same. A high-end apartment building downtown, far from our suburban life. Andrew's place. The next step was gathering more concrete evidence. I rented a car under a different name, parked it a block away from Andrew's building, and waited. I brought a camera with a telephoto lens, something I had borrowed from a coworker who was into photography. First, it was tedious. Hours passed with nothing but the occasional pedestrian walking by. But on the third day, my patience paid off. I saw her. Rebecca stepped out of the building wearing a dress I didn't recognize. Her hair styled in a way that was more seductive than I'd ever seen her wear it for me. Andrew was with her, his hand on the small of her back as they laughed and walked to his car. My stomach twisted, but I forced myself to stay calm. I snapped photos, documenting every moment. The next few weeks were a blur of planning and surveillance. I began piecing together every aspect of their relationship, where they went, who they saw, how they spent their time. I even followed Andrew to a private event one evening, slipping in unnoticed among the crowd. I listened as he bragged about his newest investment, and watched as Rebecca hung on his every word. The more I learned, the clearer my plan became. This wasn't just about humiliating Rebecca. It was about dismantling her new life entirely. And Andrew? He was the perfect starting point. It turned out Andrew's financial troubles were worse than I had imagined. Using some connections from work, I got my hands on documents that painted a damning picture. Unpaid loans, lawsuits, and a string of failed deals. The man was a walking house of cards, and all it would take was a little push to send him crashing down. But I wasn't ready to make my move just yet. Timing was everything. I needed to ensure that when I struck, there would be no escape for either of them. One evening, as I sat in the car outside Andrew's building, I noticed something new. Rebecca stepped out, this time alone, her face tense and her phone pressed to her ear. She wasn't laughing or smiling. Whatever she was saying, it was serious. I snapped a few photos, then waited until she was gone before following her route on foot. She ended up at a coffee shop across town, meeting with a woman I didn't recognize. They talked in hushed tones, their expressions serious. Something about the interaction felt off. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I knew it was important. Later that night, I went back to the receipts I had found, searching for a clue. That's when I saw it. A charge for a lawyer's office. My heart pounded as the pieces started to fit together. She wasn't just leaving me for Andrew. She was planning her exit, legally and financially. But Rebecca had underestimated me. She thought she was in control, but she had no idea I was always 2 steps ahead. By the time Rebecca filed the papers, I was ready. The lawyer's office she had visited was one of the most ruthless in the city, a place that specialized in securing large settlements. She wasn't just leaving me. She was planning to take everything she could. But what she didn't realize was that I had already set my plan into motion. The first move was subtle, almost imperceptible. I didn't want her to see it coming. I reached out to a friend of mine, Sarah, who worked in a private investigation firm. I hadn't told anyone about Rebecca or what had happened that night at the party, but Sarah had always been someone I could trust. When I explained the situation, she didn't ask questions. "Tell me what you need," she said. "I need everything on Andrew," I replied. "Every skeleton in his closet. And I need it fast." Sarah delivered. Within a week, I had a folder full of dirt on Andrew. Fraudulent business deals, unpaid taxes, even an incident involving workplace harassment that had been quietly settled out of court. It was a goldmine, and I knew exactly how to use it. The next step was planting the seeds of doubt. I created an anonymous email account and sent an email to Rebecca, attaching a few of the less damaging but still incriminating documents about Andrew's finances. The subject line was simple: "Do you know the real Andrew?" I didn't expect her to confront him right away. Rebecca was too smart for that. She'd investigate first, weigh her options, and that was exactly what I wanted. I needed her to start questioning the man she had chosen over me, to see the cracks in his perfect facade. But I wasn't done with Andrew. Not even close. Through Sarah, I learned about a property Andrew owned, a commercial building downtown that he was trying to flip for a profit. It was his last-ditch effort to stabilize his finances, and if it failed, he would be completely bankrupt. I contacted one of the contractors working on the building, posing as an anonymous whistleblower. I told him about Andrew's history of stiffing workers, provided documentation to back it up, and hinted that the project might not be as secure as Andrew claimed. Within days, the contractor pulled his team off the site, leaving Andrew scrambling to find replacements. The fallout was immediate. Andrew's reputation in the industry took a hit, and word spread quickly. Investors began backing out of deals, and the building project stalled. I could only imagine the conversations Rebecca was having with him during this time, the doubt and frustration brewing between them. But my plan wasn't just about Andrew. It was about Rebecca, too. I needed her to feel the walls closing in, to realize she had gambled everything on a sinking ship. One night, she showed up at the house unannounced. I hadn't seen her in weeks, and the sight of her standing in the doorway sent a wave of conflicting emotions through me. She looked different, tired, worn down. "Michael," she said, her voice softer than I expected. "We need to talk." I stepped aside, letting her in, but I didn't say a word. She walked into the living room, glancing around as if she didn't recognize the place she had once called home. "Are you going to say anything?" she asked, turning to face me. I shrugged. "What's there to say, Rebecca? You made your choice." She hesitated, her eyes searching mine. For a moment, I thought she might apologize, but instead, she said, "I want to end this amicably. The lawyers can handle the details, but I don't want things to get ugly." I almost laughed. Amicably? After everything she had done, she had the audacity to ask for that? "I'll think about it," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "But let me ask you something, Rebecca. Are you sure you know who Andrew really is?" Her eyes narrowed, suspicion flashing across her face. "What's that supposed to mean?" I shrugged again. "Nothing. Just a thought." She left shortly after, her expression guarded. I knew I had planted the seed, and now it was only a matter of time before it began to grow. The days following Rebecca's visit were quiet, but I could feel the tension building. I hadn't heard from her since that night, but I knew she was starting to piece things together. My anonymous email, the whispers about Andrew's failing business, the unraveling of his carefully curated image. It was all working as planned. Then, one evening, something unexpected happened. I received a text from Rebecca. "We need to meet. Tomorrow, 7 p.m. Coffee shop on 5th. Please." There was no anger in her tone, no demands. just a quiet urgency. For a moment I hesitated. What if this was a trap? What if she had figured out what I was doing and was trying to confront me? But then I realized, even if she suspected something, she had no proof. And besides, I wanted to see her reaction. The next evening, I arrived at the coffee shop early, choosing a table near the back where I could watch the door. I sipped my coffee, my mind racing with possibilities, until she finally walked in. Rebecca looked different. The confidence she usually carried was gone, replaced by something softer, almost fragile. She scanned the room, spotted me, and walked over. "Michael," she said, sitting down across from me. "Thanks for coming." I didn't respond right away, letting the silence stretch. Finally, I said, "What do you want, Rebecca?" She sighed, looking down at her hands. For the first time, I noticed how tightly she was gripping her coffee cup, her knuckles white. "I need to ask you something," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Go on," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "It's about Andrew," she said, her eyes meeting mine. You said something the other night about knowing who he really is. What did you mean by that?" I leaned back in my chair, studying her. This was the moment I had been waiting for. "I meant exactly what I said," I replied. "Do you really know the man you've been spending all your time with? Or did you just see what you wanted to see?" She flinched, her composure cracking. "Michael, I don't have time for riddles. If you know something, just tell me." I pulled out my phone, scrolling to the folder of documents Sarah had provided. "You want answers? Fine." I slid the phone across the table. "Take a look for yourself." Rebecca hesitated, her hand hovering over the phone as if touching it would make everything real. Finally, she picked it up, her eyes scanning the screen. I watched as her expression shifted. Confusion, disbelief, anger. This can't be real," she said, her voice shaking. "Oh, it's real," I said. "Every unpaid loan, every shady deal, every lawsuit he's swept under the rug. That's your golden boy, Rebecca. The man you threw everything away for." She looked up at me, her eyes wide. "Why are you showing me this? What do you get out of this?" I leaned forward, my voice low and steady. "I want you to see the truth, to understand the choices you've made and the consequences they bring. You thought you were trading up, Rebecca, but all you did was hitch yourself to a sinking ship." Her hands trembled as she set the phone down. "I didn't know," she said, almost to herself. "I didn't know it was this bad." I couldn't help but laugh, a bitter sound that echoed in the quiet of the coffee shop. "Of course you didn't know. You didn't care to know. You saw what you wanted to see, and now you're paying the price." Rebecca didn't respond. She just sat there, staring at the table, the weight of everything crashing down on her. Finally, she looked up at me, tears brimming in her eyes. "Michael, I made a mistake." I shook my head, a cold smile on my lips. "Oh, Rebecca, this isn't just a mistake. This is the life you chose, and now you get to live with it." I stood up, leaving her sitting there in the dim light of the coffee shop, alone with the mess she had created. Rebecca's reaction at the coffee shop was satisfying, but it wasn't enough. I needed to take this further. Andrew was the linchpin. If I dismantled him completely, everything she thought she had built with him would crumble, leaving her with nothing. The next phase of my plan was to expose Andrew publicly. Until now, everything I had done had been subtle whispers, seeds of doubt. But now it was time to strike hard and fast. Using the information Sarah had gathered, I compiled a dossier on Andrew's shady dealings. It wasn't just the unpaid loans and lawsuits. There were emails hinting at insider trading, fraudulent contracts, and even evidence of him forging signatures on important documents. It was the kind of dirt that could not only ruin his reputation but also land him in prison. I started anonymously leaking the documents online, targeting forums and social media pages where Andrew's investors and business associates were likely to see them. I wrote posts pretending to be a disgruntled employee, carefully crafting the narrative that Andrew's empire was built on lies and deceit. The reaction was immediate. Within hours, the posts were being shared and discussed, the story spreading like wildfire. People who had worked with Andrew started coming forward, sharing their own horror stories of being cheated or mistreated. His name was quickly becoming toxic, and his business partners were cutting ties left and right. But I wasn't done yet. Through Sarah's contacts, I managed to get a meeting with a journalist at a prominent local newspaper. I handed over the dossier, presenting it as a concerned citizen who wanted to expose corruption. The journalist was eager to run the story, and within days, a damning article about Andrew hit the front page. The fallout was spectacular. Andrew's investors pulled out of his remaining projects, leaving him financially crippled. His face was plastered across the news, his reputation in shambles. Even his closest allies turned on him, desperate to distance themselves from the sinking ship. As I watched it all unfold, I couldn't help but feel a dark sense of satisfaction. The man who had taken everything from me was finally being exposed for what he truly was. But the best part? Rebecca was caught in the crossfire. She showed up at the house again, this time looking even more disheveled than before. Her eyes were bloodshot, her clothes wrinkled, and her hands fidgeting nervously. "Michael," she said, her voice trembling. "Please, I need to talk to you." I leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. "What is it now, Rebecca? Did Andrew finally show his true colors?" Her face crumpled, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I didn't know he was like this," she said, her voice breaking. I thought he was different." I couldn't help but laugh, the sound sharp and bitter. "You thought he was better than me, didn't you? You thought he was your ticket to something better. But guess what, Rebecca? You were just another pawn in his game." She reached out, grabbing my arm. "Michael, please. I made a mistake. I was stupid, selfish. I know that now. But I need your help." I shook her off, my voice cold. "You need my help? After everything you've done? You don't deserve my help, Rebecca. You made your bed. Now lie in it." She sank to the floor, sobbing, but I felt nothing. No pity, no compassion. Just a grim satisfaction that the woman who had betrayed me was finally feeling the weight of her choices. As I closed the door on her, I knew there was no going back. This wasn't about forgiveness or redemption. This was about justice, about making sure neither Rebecca nor Andrew ever hurt me, or anyone else, again. After our confrontation at the house, Rebecca stopped pretending. The carefully constructed facade she had maintained for weeks was gone, and what remained was a hollowed-out shell of the woman I once knew. I watched from the sidelines as her life unraveled, piece by piece, knowing full well that I had orchestrated every thread of her downfall. Andrew's public disgrace hit her harder than I expected. She moved out of his apartment within days of the news breaking, leaving behind the life she had so eagerly chased. With nowhere else to turn, she rented a cheap motel room on the outskirts of town. I knew this because I had followed her there one night, my curiosity overpowering any sense of guilt. The motel was a far cry from the luxury she had grown accustomed to. The parking lot was littered with trash, and the neon sign above the entrance flickered erratically. I stayed in my car, watching as she hurried inside, her head down and her shoulders slumped. For a moment, I felt a flicker of something. Pity, maybe, but I quickly shoved it aside. She had chosen this path. Her calls and texts became more frequent in the days that followed. Each one was a desperate plea for help, a request to talk, or an apology. I ignored them all. Rebecca had spent months treating me like I was invisible, and now it was her turn to feel what that was like. But ignoring her wasn't enough. I needed to see how far she would fall. One night, I decided to visit the motel. I knocked on the door of her room, and when she opened it, the look of shock on her face was almost satisfying. "Michael," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "What are you doing here?" "I wanted to see how you're doing," I replied, my tone neutral. "Looks like things aren't going too well for you." She stepped aside, letting me in. The room was small and cluttered, the air thick with the scent of stale cigarettes. Rebecca sat on the edge of the bed, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I don't know what to say," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I messed up. I hurt you. And now, Now I've lost everything. I leaned against the wall, crossing my arms. Why are you telling me this, Rebecca? Do you think an apology is going to fix anything? No, she said, shaking her head. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't know what else to do. I thought Andrew was different. I thought he cared about me. But he used me, just like he used everyone else. Her words were a bitter reminder of the choices she had made. And for a moment, I considered walking out and leaving her to deal with the mess she had created. But something stopped me. You made your choices, I said, my voice cold. You left me for a man you barely knew, and now you're paying the price. Don't expect me to feel sorry for you. Rebecca looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. I don't expect anything from you, Michael. I needed to say it. I needed you to know that I regret everything. Her regret was palpable, but it wasn't enough. Not yet. Before I left, I looked her in the eye and said, This is just the beginning, Rebecca. You wanted to destroy me, but all you've done is destroy yourself. And I'm going to make sure you feel every moment of it. I walked out of the room without looking back, the sound of her sobs echoing behind me. I knew it was time to finish what I had started. Rebecca had been brought to her knees, but Andrew was still lurking in the shadows, trying to rebuild what was left of his empire. He didn't know it yet, but his final fall was about to come, and I was going to make sure it was as humiliating as possible. I'd kept my distance from him, watching from afar as his attempts to salvage his businesses fell flat. But this time I was going to be more direct. I reached out to one of his former partners, a man who had been burned by Andrew's lies years ago. Through a series of carefully timed phone calls and emails, I convinced him to give me the last piece of the puzzle. A video recorded in secret of Andrew admitting to his various schemes. It was the smoking gun I had been waiting for. I released the video anonymously, and within hours, Andrew was being investigated by the authorities. The charges started piling up: fraud, tax evasion, embezzlement. His entire world came crashing down, just like I'd planned. As for Rebecca, she finally reached out, but by then, it was too late. Michael, she said over the phone, her voice trembling. Please, I need you. I don't know what to do. I was wrong. I hung up before she could finish. She had chosen her path, and now there was no turning back. It was over. Andrew was arrested, his reputation in ruins. The life Rebecca had built with him collapsed into a pile of lies and broken promises. I watched as she tried to pick up the pieces, but there was no fixing it now. She came to me one last time, appearing at my doorstep as if nothing had changed. She looked different, more fragile than before, her eyes haunted. Michael, please, she whispered. I've lost everything. I know I hurt you, and I don't expect you to forgive me, but I need help. I looked at her for a long moment. The woman who once betrayed me was now a shell of who she used to be. There was no anger left in me, just a sense of finality. Help, I repeated. You had every opportunity to make things right, Rebecca, but you chose him over me. Now you deal with the consequences. She didn't say anything more. She just turned and walked away, the weight of her decisions hanging over her like a dark cloud. I stood at the door for a long time, watching her disappear into the night. There was no satisfaction in this moment, just a cold, empty feeling. The game was over. Weeks passed after that last encounter with Rebecca, and life continued. It wasn't the happy, victorious ending I had once envisioned. The satisfaction of seeing her and Andrew crumble didn't feel like a victory. It felt like an eerie silence, a void. I'd won, but at what cost? The revenge had been sweet in its moment, but now, I was left to face the reality of it all. I had no desire to reach out to her, nor did I need any form of closure. The anger that had once driven me was gone, replaced by a deeper understanding of what I had truly lost. Rebecca had made her choices and I had made mine. But in the end, neither of us came out unscathed. She had lost everything, and I had gained nothing. I thought about what had led me here, about the betrayal, the rage, the need for revenge. And I realized something. The hardest part wasn't the anger. It was realizing that sometimes, letting go is the only way to move forward. There was no sense in holding onto the past. No reason to keep dragging it with me. I took a deep breath, closed that chapter of my life, and walked away. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply to walk away from what no longer serves you. And so I did. Thank you for following along with this journey. What would you have done in my place? Leave a comment below, share your thoughts, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. The past is a heavy thing to carry, but the future is yours to shape.